Welcome to the latest indiedev showcase, highlighting the many indie game demos and submitted games we play here. If you'd like to submit a game for a future piece, please get in touch. We are starting off with the game Monster Harvest. Please know that this game is in early access and what you see may not represent the current version of it. But this is a game that, well, basically combines two bits of love. We have Stardew Valley and Pokemon. We live in a world where a scientist discovers a mysterious slime that can be used to transform fruits and vegetables into, well, monsters that can be used to do basic chores or, of course, get into battles with. You play as a recently moved tenant to this town, and it's up to you to grow your farm, grow your monster. I forget the name of what they call them in this game, and of course possibly unearth some kind of evil conspiracy going around. So similar to Stardew Valley and how you had the farming sim slice of life, and then you had the kind of dungeon crawling combat side. That's kind of where Monster Harvest fits, but replace the dungeon crawling combat with Pokemon style battles. You'll have to grow your various monsters out of the crops you raise in the ground using different kinds of slime. Now, my big issue with this game was that it didn't feel like both of these systems were really working in tandem. The basic farming felt a little too simplistic and a little too grindy at the start. And I hope since we last played this game that they've done a little bit more to improve the onboarding and early game. Was that I felt like we were doing a lot of busy work before we could actually get into the combat. Now, once we get into the combat, that also comes with its own problems of also being very slow and grindy. You see, when a monster gets knocked out, you'll have to leave the dungeon. So when you're starting out and you only have like one or two, you can barely make any real dent in terms of progress. But the general, I guess like all the individual parts coming together is intriguing to me. As I said at the start, I don't know where the game is at currently in its early access, so things could have improved since we played it. But this is one of those concepts. I would suggest that if this kind of combination sounds intriguing to you, to at least give it a check and see where it's at right now. For our next game, this is Recompile. And this is a Metroidvania with a little bit of, I guess, that classic show reboot thrown in. We are a somewhat sentient program inside a massive computer system, and we're going to do some, I guess, on-the-field hacking in order to figure out what went wrong. So, the game itself, from an aesthetic standpoint, I really do like it. It reminds me a bit about the game Darwinia, if you remember that one from Introversion. But the general moment-to-moment is going to be about exploring these massive systems, fighting off programs, and of course, in Metroidvania fashion, finding upgrades, weapons, etc., etc. My main issue that I had with the game was that I just did not like the general moment-to-moment feel of it. Combat can be very annoying with enemies who can track you and shoot you from very far away. You'll gain a few abilities at the start, and you'll also have to rely heavily on kind of the progress, I guess, quote-unquote, bonfires. Well, I forget the actual name of it is here. But the game is definitely going for kind of that Soulsy vibe of, here's a wide open space, figure things out on your own. And I think the general onboarding, like especially the early game, could have done a little bit better in terms of preparing the player, as well as just making some of these challenges a little bit more interesting to do. You will gain the ability to kind of, I guess, quote-unquote, hack certain things using your kind of like your scanner or whatever the in-game universe thing was for it. But this is, again, one of those games where I really like the style. I'm just not sure if the gameplay really managed to pull it all off. We now have The Night is Grey. This is a demo that we tried out a while ago. This is point-and-click adventure game using kind of hand-drawn animation and aesthetic to give it a really, I think, solid look to it. We play as a man named Graham, who is lost in the woods. There are wolves after him, and apparently he finds a little girl alone in a cabin with her mother missing. And thus we begin our point-and-click adventure. So this is definitely done in the classic point-and-click adventure style, where you'll be looking for a myriad of random items, doodads, and MacGuffins that will help you, hopefully, in terms of puzzle solving. This is one of those games where you will not be allowed to pick up an item or interact with something unless there is an immediate need for it. So you're not going to be having a huge inventory of items at all times. Now, I played this demo twice. The first time we played it, it was a little bit on the slower side, so you couldn't just move from scene to scene, you had to wait for the walking animation. That has been taken care of, I believe, in the updated demo. I would put this in terms of puzzle logic and things like that to be, I would say, on the moderate side. This is definitely for people who are new or maybe very recent to the adventure genre. This one would be, I think, on the little bit on the harder side in terms of some of the logic and things you have to do. But if you are an adventure game fan, if you like kind of the hand-drawn, almost like kind of like stop-motion animation, I would give this one a check. The demo is still up as of right now. But with that said, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we have 3 more games to look at for our showcase. And as always, if you're interested in my thoughts on design, then check out my game design books. For entry-level students, we have 20 essential games to study, and then the Game Design Deep Dive series that takes an extensive look at different genres, with free-to-play coming in 2022. And now for something really different, this is Space Tow Truck. This is a kind of casual, physics-driven puzzle game in a kind of a similar vein to a Zachtronics title. You have been crash-landed on the moon, and the very strange tow trucking service instead tasks you to complete a series of puzzles in order to, well, get yourself out of your own jam. So the game makes use of a lot of realistic physics problems and things along those lines. I believe the designer of this on the store page is an actual physics teacher, so a lot of the stuff is certainly over my head. But the general gameplay is that you will define different things that happen at different seconds. That's using the X and Y functions that you can see on the left. So you can tell it to move to a specific coordinate after X amount of seconds. The game will eventually allow you to do things that will adjust the physics of your moment and inertia as well. And as you beat the maps, you'll also get fun factoids and science facts about the moon, physics, and things like that. If you're hoping for the Dark Souls of physics classes, this is definitely not going to be it. And I would say this game definitely falls maybe along the lines of edutainment. If you like puzzle solving and looking for one that has some real world applications or real world physics logics to it, I would check this one out. But if you fell asleep during your physics class, or this doesn't sound the most interesting to you, I don't think Space Tow Truck is going to turn you into a physicist overnight. If you're looking for something with far less physics-related puzzles, we now have Fire Tonight. This is a short, kind of puzzle-light action-adventure style game. We play as a couple who, well, as the title implies, there is a fire tonight in the city. And they are trying to get back together when everything city-related stands in their way. So the main thing about this game is that each level is presented as a kind of open puzzle. Your job is to get to the goal while moving, pushing, and somehow warping as you go inside certain buildings to get around. Your headphones can be used to allow you to ignore fire for a little bit of time. Best not to think about that in some cases. But this is a game that I would say is on the, I would say, easy to moderate side in terms of its puzzles. Nothing you really haven't seen before. We're not getting into Witness or Zachtronics levels of puzzle solving here. I like the aesthetic of the game with kind of like the, I guess like almost like cel shade or like comic book kind of look to it. There are hidden collectibles, but all in all, this is a short game. I think we finished this in about like an hour to an hour and a half, maybe a little bit less than that. So if you're looking for something that you can finish in an evening that has a decent story and aesthetic, I would say check this one out. For the last game of our episode, this is Arboria. This is a third-person, kind of roguelike, Souls-like-ish kind of game. You play as trolls on a mysterious alien planet when one of the heroes, for some strange reason, becomes possessed by a strange helmet, and we are going to have to go down into the planet's surface fighting myriad of bugs and weird things in order to figure out what's going on and save the day. So the game itself is definitely fashioned around a Souls-like design where you'll have to do a lot of dodging, make use of your specials, and of course not get killed by any of the major things. The levels themselves are procedurally generated, with each room of course having different resources, different tools you can find. There is persistence in the form of being able to upgrade different abilities, as well as your starting conditions, like starting with better trolls and that kind of thing. And this is one of those games where my big issue with it was that it just didn't feel as good to play compared to, well, as we all know, like a Dark Souls style game. You'll have to make use of light and heavy swings. It's one of those titles where it's very hard to really fight lots of enemies, or enemies that you can't easily stun lock, as you're not going to be able to move or react as fast compared to some of the other games. Now, you'll only get major progress by making it to various points that will kind of unlock fast travels back. But I do like the aesthetic of this game. It really reminds me of kind of like a Dark Souls Fraggle Rock, if that makes any sense. I think ultimately this is one of those games where if you've played a lot of the more well-known or recognizable Souls-likes, this one I don't think does enough to stand out from that crowd. If you haven't played one of those and are looking for kind of an indie take, I think this is a decent game. It did go a long way through its early access, because I remember the original version of it being, I think, even clunkier to enjoy. But I would say this is a decent game, but ultimately not one of my favorite Souls-likes. So with that said, we're going to wrap up our episode. Be sure to do all the liking, subscribing, and commenting. Again, if you'd like me to tickle your game for a future piece, please get in touch. Check out our Discord and Patreon link down below, and come back for daily discussions on game design here, and on game wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Until next time, take care.